Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Lead Well Wednesdays presented by the Tailboard Misfits podcast. Today, I'm joined with my co-host, Brad Conrado. We got another good one planned up for you. It was actually a suggestion by one of you, the viewers and listeners that listen to this podcast. I've kind of been overwhelmed with the amount of support we've gotten from this specific venture we've gone on with the leadership stuff. Obviously, we're pretty passionate about leadership, and we care about people getting better and wanting to get better. So right off the bat, if you want to hear anything about leadership, please DM me, hit me up on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever the case may be, or leave a comment on wherever you're listening or watching this. Before we get started and getting into the episode, once again, if you find value in the show, please just do us a favor and share it. Just create a post, share the link, share it with your friends, listen to it with your crew. Whatever the case is, just please share it. That's the only way that we're going to grow. It's the only way that we're going to be successful in this is you. So far, we really appreciate it. I've seen a lot of good stuff on the social medias. So it would be nice just to continue to see it grow and continue to flourish. Today, we're going to talk about culture and why culture is important. And culture is a big buzzword of the fire service. And luckily, Brad and I have seen kind of both ends of a good culture, a bad culture, a medium culture. And so I feel like we both have something good to add to the conversation. So we're going to get into it. First and foremost, before we get too deep into it, we want to kind of define what culture is. And for us, what it means for us, and I kind of took this straight off the internet, and it's one that I personally believe it aligns the best with firefighters and fire service. It says shared behaviors, values, beliefs, and traditions that define a group of people, which for this podcast's sake is us as firemen. It's the behaviors we show on calls at the firehouse with each other's families. It's the values the things that we value. It's our beliefs, the things we agree about in the firehouse, on the fire ground, and our traditions, the things we uphold that we've had for many, many years throughout the fire service and at our fire department. I think it's a super important trait and of your crew and of your department. It's awesome when there's a healthy one going and living. So you could definitely tell the difference between a bad culture and a good culture. And we're going to get into all that. But first, I kind of want Brad to talk about why culture is important.
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that culture is important, and just for the sheer fact, honestly, that like whether you think it's a thing or not, it is, right? Like you defined it, culture is defined by your values and beliefs that are expressed through actions. What you show up to work every day and do defines your values. And I know we're going to get into values here in a little bit, but regardless whether you think culture exists or not, or you think you have a bad one or a good one, or it's not important, like what you value is going to be a direct reflection of what it looks like at the firehouse, how your days run. And if your values aren't good, then your culture is not going to be good. So that's why I think it's important. You just got to define it and recognize that it actually is a thing. So.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious. I talk to a lot of people all over the country, and one of the best things I've been able to do is just share, honestly, just the good experiences that we have at work. And, I feel like, not to get too braggy or talk about us and our department too much, but I feel like we're pretty fortunate, specifically at our crew and at our station, to have that healthy and good culture. And so I've had several people reach out because I've mentioned that on several episodes. And so it seems like the common theme is people are struggling to establish a culture. There's really not a culture. It's show up to work, do your job, and go home. And these people want to start and they want to establish a culture, and they're really curious on how to do that. So that's kind of the first thing we're going to talk about, is really just establishing the culture where there really is none. And you might be living in that of the realm of just showing up to work. It's another day at work. You get on the rig, you run your calls, you do what's expected of you and go home. But there's nothing really that defines you and your crew. And I love this. We kind of talked about this before the podcast started. But when you establish a culture, it's really reliant on three things: vision, values, and action. And we're going to talk about vision for a second, and we're going to break down each of these things. So when we're talking about vision, it's starting with the end in mind. What do you want the culture to look like? At the end, whenever you're done establishing it, what do you want it to look like? Do you want the culture of showing up with coffee time on the bumper of the rig, mask up drills first thing in the morning, training for 30 minutes a shift? Whatever the case is, you have to define what you want your culture to look like. It's pretty as simple as that, but you have to start with the end in mind. And then moving into your values. Values is really your actions. And I'm going to let Brad talk about actions and kind of break down into that a little bit. But from your vision, you move into your values.
Yeah. So, like when you talk about, I think when you keep it at the forefront of your brain, vision, uh, values, and then action steps that you take following that, I think you have to be crystal clear in every one of those. And any time that you're executing something in the direction to create that positive change in culture or building of culture, I think if it's not crystal clear, it's going to be a little ambiguous, and you're not going to execute consistently. Which we can talk about the importance of consistency and all this, but yeah. So you've got a vision, you know where you want to go, and then you start creating values, right? So vision is the goal, that's the finish line, and then the values are the pathway to the finish line. So if I can define what my values want to be, and real practically speaking, like if you value training, if you value camaraderie, if you value comfort, if you value laziness, like whatever direction that you want to go, to get to that vision, that is what is going to be defined by your values, whether you want them to or not, right? Like I said at the beginning of this, what I show up, even if I don't define them on paper or in my mind, what I go to work looking forward to for the day, what my goals are and priorities for the day, whether that's comfort, whether that's to run calls and go to fires, whether that's to train, whatever it is, that is the definition of my values, whether you like it or not. So I think if you can be really crystal clear in what you want those values to be, it's going to give you a target to be able to aim for when you start to slip, when you come in and you're having a bad day and you want to be lazy, or whatever the case may be. It's a healthy place to remind yourself, like, okay, like this is where we want to go, and this is how we're going to get there. So having those values, and then like action steps. So it's kind of in that order is how you want to define it: vision, values, and then take action. And you can say action or setting goals, and you got to get really practical with yourself. So if within my vision, where I want to take the company, where I want to go, and training's an easy one, so we can use training for an example. Like if we say that we value training, right, but we don't train every shift, well, then it's really not a value. It's just empty words, right? I love the quote, knowledge without action is useless, right? If we don't act on the wisdom that we have, then it's really all for naught. So you have to be really, really practical when you start setting those action steps. So if I say we value training, well, every shift we're going to train, right? Whether that's 10 minutes or 10 hours, right? We're going to train. And we have to do that. We have to meet those action steps. So that way we can say that we're adhering to those values. And yeah, so.
Yeah. And, when we're talking about values, and really, I kind of think values and actions almost need to be, which they're paired together, but they almost need to be one, just because those actions are going to be a direct representation of what you assign your values to be. Right. And I guess they're all three connected, very closely. But one of the other things that I thought about with values is we talk about valuing people. And we can say that we value people all the time, but our actions must follow that up, right? Like one of the other things I've read or maybe listened to when it comes to culture and leadership is it talks about symbols. And what it means by symbols is talking about like accolades and what your equipment looks like and what your uniforms look like and how you treat people, right? And we throw out quotes all the time. I love the quote that says, people won't remember like what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so we got to make sure that we're prioritizing people, not just with our words, but also our actions. So you have a rookie on your shift and they meet their probationary year, like celebrate that, do something fun for them, start a tradition. If there's not one already there, like think of something, new, or even if you have to steal it from another department that they do for their rookies, like get something and celebrate those guys, because we could sit here and say that we care about people and that people matter, but if we're not showing them that through our actions, like you said, it's kind of empty and worthless. And then the other part of that was like the systems that you make, and I know Brad's pretty big on systems with culture. And I was reading, I want to say it was Atomic Habits. So this is kind of like I paired this all together. And
Great book.
Yeah, it's an amazing book, but it kind of made me think of the he talks about like almost like a trigger. So we'll use 75 hard for example, right? You pair brushing your habit stacking. That's what I was trying to think of. You pair brushing your teeth in the morning with taking the progress picture in 75 hard, right? So you just kind of build that foundation. And it's the same thing in the firehouse. And that's kind of the way that I've done it. We already are going to start checking our gear off. And even before I would do a whole mask up drill thing in the morning, I would still check my gear off in the morning, my air pack off in the morning. Now it's just like, I'm already going to check my gear or my air pack. Now I'm just going to stack masking up on it. So put those systems in place to help you allow your actions to line up with your values. I think that's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you have to, the things that you do are going to define your values, right? Whether you write these values down and you've got all these best intentions, what you actually do is what you actually value. So if you want to take yourself, if you want to go somewhere from where you're at, and maybe you're not necessarily doing the things that you want to execute on, you're not actually adhering to values that you want to adhere to, then you gotta set systems in place. And those systems are habits, right? Like you said, when it comes to masking up, right? If you want to be fast at masking up, then set the habit, right? And you set the habit. You're supposed to check your air pack every day. So when we get a rep in, right? Whatever you want to do to take yourself in the direction to get to that vision, right? And anytime that we execute on an action plan, I think it's healthy to, even in the moment, like, dude, I'm going to be honest. Like, I check my air pack every day, but there's days that I don't want to mask up, right? For whatever reason, right? We all know the reasons. But when I tell myself, like, I'm not going to get to where I want to go if I don't do this, and just bring it back to yourself in the moment, I think it makes it a lot easier to execute those small things, even when they seem insignificant, right? Everybody knows that consistency is key, right? The cliche quote, right? It's better to be consistently good than occasionally great. And, what makes a professional? It's practicing through boredom. It's taking the mundane, minute details of the day and executing on them every single day without fail. And yeah, I think when you do those things, you're going to get to that vision a lot faster. But it doesn't always happen fast. So just remember to be patient. Yeah.
Right. I think one of the other things that it said is like culture is established over time. It's not something that you're gonna say, all right, I want to start doing this. I want to make our crew have a great culture, and then expect it to happen in one shift or one tour or whatever. Like through consistency, you have to build that. And we were kind of talking about the consistency part and talking about account. Actually, real quick, before we move into that, I want to hit on something because while you were talking about it, we didn't talk about this beforehand, so sorry. Your opinion on mission statements, like personal mission statements, or even writing like almost like no, I don't want to use that word, a mission statement for your crew or even if it's at the department level. Like, what's your opinion on mission statements? Do you think they'll help with this? And I kind of feel like it's the same thing as visions, but specifically like writing it out to be able to share it with your crew or whatever.
Yeah, so I think just simply stated, mission statements are awesome, right? I've got them that are personal to me, that are personal to, my marriage, that are personal to being a father. Like I've got different mission statements because I've got different visions for my life, and I think it's healthy to write those things down. But purely stated, in my opinion, a mission statement is a statement that is made of your vision, where you want to go, include the values that you have, right? So once you have an idea in your mind of your vision, right? And I think it's healthy to like take time and write things out. And where do you want to go? Like whether it's personally or as a crew, like what do you guys want? What do you want that crew to look like, right? And closing your eyes, taking a second to envision that, embody that, and whatever you need to do to kind of figure out where you want to go, write it down, and then get real specific with values. And you don't need to have 100 values written down on paper, right? Condense it down. Have a top 10 or a top 5 and really get specific in what those values are, and then use those values with the vision in mind to create a statement that is going to get you there. That way you have something to remind yourself of in the moment, right? That's that me not wanting to do my mask up drill in the morning when I'm checking my air pack, I can recite that mission statement to me and it fires me up. It's like, okay, this is where we're going. This is what I need to do. Let's execute. So,
Yeah. And I also believe that words have power, right? And so whenever, specifically when you yourself take the time to put pen to paper or whatever, if you don't like that, you can type it out. Whenever you're writing something, for me, it almost becomes like, it almost becomes permanent. Like, this is what I'm doing now. And like, especially whenever you get it right and you word it well and stuff like that. Like, I really enjoyed that because much like you, I do have the same thing. I have different, mission statements, if you will, for more or less each part of my life. I don't remember if I got that idea from you or not. Maybe it was just what we listened to.
well, if you got it from me, I didn't come up with that. So,
Yeah, what I was about to throw a shameless plug out there because I love feel good stuff and almost motivational things. And if you guys haven't heard of Chad Wright, you can look up Chad Wright's episode. I would be lying if I tried to tell you the episode number on the Real AF podcast with Andy Frisella. He goes through, and you could just YouTube Chad Wright personal creed, and it'll come up on YouTube. And it is one of the best things I've ever heard before. And it's kind of like a makeup of his the same creed they used in the Navy SEALs, but it kind of gives you at least down the right rabbit hole, the right path if you wanted to write your own mission statement. And it's great. I love it. It fired me up. I think I shared it with you guys at the fire station because it was that good.
yeah, it was really good.
So, okay, now we got through the mission statement. Let's move on to like, okay, hey, we have a good culture and we need to just maintain it, right? We need to keep the culture good. And I personally believe that comes through, yes, consistency, but also accountability amongst peers. And I think it's super important. This is where I think, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up was the mission statement thing is if you have it written and it's written down and it's shared with your crew, and I'm specifically talking about crews here, and Brad, you're not meeting the standard that we have set for ourselves and your actions aren't lining up with our goals, it makes it a lot easier for me to approach you and say, hey, Brad, what's up with this? You haven't done a mask up drill in 4 shifts now and have kind of been paying attention or whatever the case is. But we talk about that accountability level, and I kind of know where we're going to go with this, but I want you to take over. Talk about just that accountability when it comes to maintaining specifically culture within your crew. Specifically up, because I feel like it's always down. Down's easy, right? You could come to me and tell me I've been being a craphead, and it's pretty easy for you to do that. But if you had to, if I had to go to you and say that, it would be a little bit differently. So just kind of talk about that real quick. Talk about what it means to hold yourself accountable first, and then your crew accountable as it pertains to culture.
Yeah, so I think it comes back to that mission statement. I talked about a little bit about it, right? Like coming back to that mission statement and understanding, being crystal clear in your values. And I think that's one way to hold yourself accountable. I think obviously putting people in your life that have the same mindset and the same understanding, and having open lines of communication. I feel like, pride comes before the fall, right? When pride comes in, like it's really hard to be teachable and be approached. So I think when you walk in humility and recognize that I'm going to have bad days, I'm going to have times when I'm slipping, like just go into it understanding that I'm not going to be perfect and I don't need to put the perception out that I'm going to be. I think it makes it a lot easier for guys, especially like in the formal ranking system that's the fire service, for having guys that like are maybe beneath you that might be afraid to approach you because you're a driver, an officer, chief, whatever. Having that open line of communication and the understanding that like, hey, if I'm slipping, like you need to come to me and tell me, right? That's how we all get better. And it goes back to like the proverb. I've told this to a lot of guys, like when people come to you and they tell you that you're slipping, that you're messing up, that you're not meeting the mark, whatever the case is, it's because they see an opportunity for growth. Right. We've always said in the firehouse, like, and I think I said this in another podcast, like we mess with you because we like you, right? Be careful when we don't, right? When we don't mess with you, when we don't say anything, because what happens is, and not that I agree with it, but when people don't see the opportunity to help somebody grow because they've always got an excuse, then they just stop telling them, right? They no longer see the opportunity for growth. So they kind of just start to wash their hands of them. So I think walking in humility and letting people approach you and say like, hey man, you're messing up, and ask good questions, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? Ask questions. Okay, why do you think I'm slipping? Why do you think this? Especially if you may disagree in the moment. I think it's a lot easier to react than it is to ask questions. And so, man, if it's something like you come to me in the morning, and I know we keep regurgitating this example, but like, hey, I'm not masking up for however many shifts, and you want to approach me about it, I think that's a lot easier than you come to me and you say like, hey, man, you're being a jerk to everybody, and your attitude's poor, and that's a lot harder to swallow than like, yeah, man, I'm slipping on my mask up. So I think just realizing that it doesn't the dynamic doesn't change. Like
Yeah.
you have to ask good questions, and I think it gives the ability for people to hold you accountable. Because if
Yeah.
you're not approachable, then there's no accountability.
Yeah. And I feel like just elaborating on the receiving end of that, like something that I've learned over the years, because I used to suck at this, and I'll be the first person to admit it, is whenever I would receive feedback that was not necessarily negative, but constructive, someone would approach me about something, I had a tendency to make up excuses or kind of be like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, that's not me. And I'm just kind of pushing back. And realistically speaking, the areas that, whenever you get approached by someone about something that you have not been doing very well, or you just getting, overall feedback, and you start feeling some resistance there from the inside, you start feeling like you want to push back a little bit. Chances are, and now this is what I do, I use that as a chance to like perk up and listen, because chances are, just like you said, that is an opportunity for growth, and it's somewhere in an area that I've actually been lacking. So I need to be paying attention to what they said, and just like you said, just ask good questions. So typically, if I'm having a conversation with someone and someone's trying to give me some more or less constructive criticism, and I start feeling inside of me kind of pridefully taking over a little bit, that I start feeling like I want to give a little pushback. I'm not perfect at it, but I typically try to use that as a chance to ask good questions about why they feel that way, and then kind of just pull the reins back on me wanting to get a little aggressive sometimes, and pay attention. Once again, if you listen to
Yeah.
this and you've like seen me not do it, don't call me out. I'm telling you, I suck at it sometimes.
Well, and I was also gonna say, like, if you feel like in the moment you can't handle it, right? Because sometimes that stuff's hard, man. That's not always easy to hear, right? And if you're battling that, man, sometimes the best thing that you can do is just say, "Thank you for sharing. Let me process it," and walk away, right? Don't give them an answer. Don't say anything, because it could not be the right thing, and you could react instead of try to understand. So, and I've done
Yeah,
that, right? Thank you for sharing. Give me a second. Let me think about it.
that's where I need growth at.
Same, dog.
Oh, okay. So we're kind of talking about, establishing growth, maintaining growth. And I really wanted to hit on this because we kind of talked about it beforehand. I've read that and I believe it, when we're talking about culture, it's established at the top and it's maintained by really the middle and the bottom. So it's established at the top by your leaders, by your more or less assigned per rank leaders, but it's maintained by the middle and the bottom. But we were talking about this, and you had an interesting perspective, so I want to kind of get into it. We talked about, yes, if you have no culture, your leader has to be the one, your officer has to be the one to more or less establish that culture. They have to create the mission statement. They have to set the vision. But it doesn't always mean that those vision and values have to come from that officer. He just has to be the one to enforce it. So
Yeah.
we talked about creating influence, and we talk about how leadership is influence, and how can we, as not captains, not lieutenants, not the boss of our crew, have that influence with our officer to establish a culture.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I want to talk about in this, but I think starting with building culture from the bottom up is really hard to do. And what we're trying to do with this vision, values, and we're trying to create standards and accountability, right? I know I've heard you say it, I've said it, right? You can't change what you can't define, right? If you don't know where you're going, like it's hard to grow. And so I think by creating these and being very crystal clear in what your vision is for the crew or whatever, right? I think it gives you a roadmap. And it's in trying to take you to a place of growth and getting better. But I think like when you talk about building vision and building culture, oftentimes, especially even in the fire service, like we look at it as like, okay, we want to build culture for our crew or our firehouse. And so within that unit, obviously it's going to be easiestly done by the officer, right? Whoever's in charge of that unit. But if you think about like what is leadership, that's from a formal perspective. And we talk about leadership's influence, and influence is really informal. And so just realizing that it doesn't matter the rank that you're at, be it a firefighter or a driver or a brand new guy walking in the door, if you have influence, you can create culture. It doesn't necessarily have to be formal. Obviously, the more formal it is, the higher in rank you are, the quicker that can happen, right? And that's the big hinge piece is time, right? You got to be patient. You got to be consistent. Things don't happen overnight. I love the quote. We often underestimate what we can do in the long term, and we overestimate what we can do in the short term. Just realize changing culture, dude, it can take decades depending on where you work, right? And specific to what it is. But yeah, just realizing like in your rank, you can start creating vision, right? I'm a driver and I've got 2 firefighters underneath me at the fire station that I'm formally over. And I can start creating vision and mission within those and start adhering to values and bringing people with me. And thankfully for us, it's not the case, but if I had an officer that I worked for that didn't believe in the same things that I did not have the same values, doesn't care about training, doesn't care about people, whatever the case may be, that doesn't mean that I can't start creating culture and creating following with the influence that I have. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to give someone like I want to give people that are listening a success story based off of what we just talked about, and it's something that we've been open with before via the Grabs podcast and other things like that, and it's low hanging fruit for this certain scenario, and you're the one to talk about this because you know about it more than me, but I could kind of set the ground. So at our department, prior to probably somewhere in the 8 to 10 year ago range. From what I've been told, our search culture was non-existent. And you could correct me or fill in gaps wherever when you start talking, Brad. Then, and I'm going to let you tell the story. Not an officer, just a firefighter, and I don't want to say just a firefighter, but a firefighter goes out to a class at a conference, and now here we are 8-10 years later, and definitely proud to say that our search culture is like top notch, and we're having to just fill in, like every new guy's getting taught what that one person went out and learned at a conference 8 or 10 years ago. And so that is a culture that was established more or less by influence through a firefighter. So if you want to just talk about it, elaborate where you can, and just kind of give someone a little success story to know that this is possible, even from an informal leadership role.
yeah, sure. So I wouldn't say our search culture was non-existent. We definitely searched. I think the priority and emphasis, just like it was a decade ago for a lot of fire departments, and probably for some still is, like search was not the priority, right? And I think through this influence, it's shifted in our fire department in a big way, which is awesome. But yeah, Stephen Winchell, right? I've talked about him before. Huge mentor to me in the fire service, spiritually, otherwise. And he attended a class up in firemanship in Portland when it was still in Portland, and took Brothers in Battle Beyond the Door, and kind of learned that search is a priority, and kind of realized that, through Fire Academy and other ways that it kind of was taking a backseat, and firefighter safety was taking the priority. And I'll be honest, like Lieutenant Winchell has got has got a lot of influence in our fire department, and rightfully so. Great man of character, has done a lot for our department, and has a huge level of influence. Now, at the time, he's just a firefighter, or he was a firefighter, not just a firefighter. And came back and was pretty heavily involved in our mentor program, or our new hire orientation, onboarding new cadets. Search training was part of that orientation, and he came in and started creating a curriculum and creating a roadmap to how we should search, and led with a lot of the why, right? Anytime you want to change something, you got to lead with the why. You got to empower people and educate people so they don't just think it's coming from you. And he did that, right? And he did it very gracefully and very well, and people understood it. And yeah, it kind of ran like wildfire in our fire department. We started training that way. People were bought in, and we started making grabs, believe it or not. When this mindset kind of came back, I started realizing there's better people out there to give you the real numbers and data. But 10 years ago, there wasn't very many documented grabs that we know of. And just within the last 10 years, we've had like 7, 8, 9 just within our department. And it's been pretty cool to see that a firefighter who had influence came back and was able to change the culture. So yeah, it can be done. Just realize you got to build that influence, right? And that's the stuff that we're talking about, how to do that.
Yeah. And just going along the lines with culture, I really want to emphasize like the action part, because yes, this is a podcast and yes, we're just talking here, but we have to take action in what we say. So kind of wanted to give some actionable steps and what you as the listener can do and take from this podcast to start implementing the culture that you want. So the first thing that I'm going to recommend is, even if you have to write it down in a mission statement form, create a vision of where you want, even if it's you. I mean, like, you yourself create a culture within yourself, how you're presented and how you act. So even if it has to be just you at the moment, sit down and write a vision statement, a mission statement for where you want to end up at. Get your priorities in line. Do you want it to be training and people and, teaching, or whatever the case is for you specifically? Put it on paper and write it down. And then print it out and put it in your locker at work. I will send, and I'll throw this out there. If you create a vision statement and you have it, let's just say you have it. I don't care if you got the idea from us or not. And you print it off and you put it in your locker at work. Send me a picture of it on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll send you a free t-shirt. So that's a challenge right there. And then just start being consistent with it. Pick one action that aligns with your values and do it for 6 weeks and see where that gets you. And then just, like I said, give us feedback. We want to know if this is helping you guys. We want to know that you guys enjoy listening to this. Like I said, this is a passion of ours, and we enjoy talking about leadership. And we wanted to make it in short, easily digestible segments, if you will, episodes. I told Brad with this is I wanted to keep it to where I could listen to this on the way into work. So that's kind of what we're doing. So once again, if you liked this episode, if you found value in this episode, please just do us a favor and share it. Send it to your crew. Watch it as a crew. Tag us in a post about it if you liked it. Whatever the case is, just share the episode. We want to get this to the ends of the fire service. Other than that, guys, remember, the best leaders know the way, show the way, and go the way. Stay ready, stay humble, and we'll see you on the big one.
Yeah, let's take a trip. Just sit back and light a split with this and don't slip on a funky dope track. Jump back, strapped with a fat Buddha sack and a 7/8 black. Don't